So, have you ever stopped to think about where Python actually came from? I mean, it just feels so natural, so, well, Pythonic. But languages like this don't just spring into existence. Today, we're going to dig into the secret family tree of Python, and you might be surprised to see how three totally different languages, C, Shell, and another one called ABC, all played a part in creating the language we use today.
And that question, it really gets to the heart of what makes Python so special, doesn't it? The answer isn't some simple, it was invented on this date. It's more of a story about learning from what worked, and maybe more importantly, what didn't work, in the languages that came before it.
Exactly. This is the whole idea. Python's creator, Guido van Rossum, he wasn't just starting with a blank slate. He was building on all these lessons, the good and the bad, from some really influential predecessors. So let's take a look at what they were.
So where does Guido's story even start? Well, long before he ever wrote the first line of Python code, he was down in the trenches, working with other languages every day. And each one of those experiences left a mark. It taught him some really valuable lessons about what a programming language should be.
It all boils down to three major influences that shaped his thinking. We're going to look at each one. First, the raw, unadulterated power of C. Then, the simple, get-it-done attitude of shell scripting. And finally, the beautiful readability of a teaching language called ABC. First up, the Titan, C. Let's talk about C. If you've ever coded in C, you know this feeling. It is like being handed the keys to the entire machine. You get total control, you can talk directly to memory, and the speed is just blistering. There's a reason it's the language of operating systems. But you know the saying, with great power comes a whole lot of complexity. C makes you work for that speed. You're in there, manually managing every bit of memory, fighting with pointers, and just getting totally lost in these low-level details. It's this constant trade-off between power and your own productivity.
And Guido saw all of this firsthand. He had immense respect for the power that C gave him, but he was also just so frustrated by how much effort it took to get anything done. He just knew there had to be a better way to do things. He needed a different angle.
So if C was the super powerful but really clunky toolkit, shell scripting was kind of like the Swiss Army knife, right? It was never meant for building these huge, sprawling applications. It was designed for one thing, getting small jobs done quickly and easily. It was pretty much the perfect antidote to C's complexity.
For simple, day-to-day stuff, Shell is your best friend. You need to rename 1,000 files, automate a quick backup, no problem at all. But the second you try to build something even a little bit complex, you just hit a wall. The very thing that makes Shell so simple, the fact that it doesn't have much structure, suddenly becomes its biggest weakness.
So, okay, this was another huge insight for Guido. Simplicity isn't just a nice-to-have feature, it's absolutely essential for keeping developers productive. But he also saw that simplicity without real power is basically a dead end. He had to find a way to get both.
All right, so Guido had seen both ends of the spectrum, right? The raw power of C and the simple utility of Shell. But there was one more piece to this puzzle, and it came from a pretty unexpected place, a teaching language called ABC. Now, ABC wasn't made for building operating systems or automating server tasks. It was designed for one thing, to be easily understood by human beings.
And Guido was really captivated by this. The code was just so clean, so readable. It was like a breath of fresh air. But for all its elegance, ABC had this one massive flaw. It was basically a walled garden. You couldn't easily make it talk to the outside world, to the operating system. And that made it a complete non-starter for any practical, real-world programming.
And there it was, the final piece of the puzzle. He realized that readability isn't just about making code look pretty. It's fundamental to writing software that people can actually maintain over time. But readability without the ability to do real work, well, that's just a toy. He needed to somehow combine the elegance of ABC with the practical power of C and Shell. So now you have these three totally separate ideas floating around. The intense power from C, the effortless simplicity from Shell, and this human-first readability from ABC. And in Guido's mind, they all started to connect, and it led to this huge breakthrough moment.
Okay, so let's recap. From C, he took away the absolute necessity of power. From Shell, he learned the incredible value of simplicity. And from ABC, he understood the critical importance of readability. Each one of these languages had a piece of the answer, but not a single one of them had the whole thing.
And that's when the big idea really hit him. What if you didn't have to choose?
What if you could build a language that was as powerful as C, as simple to use as Shell, and as easy to read as ABC? That was the audacious goal that kicked off the entire project that would become Python.
And that's it. That's why Python feels the way it does today. It wasn't designed in some academic vacuum. It was forged in the fire of real-world programming, as a direct answer to the daily frustrations that developers like Guido were facing. You could almost say it's a language built out of empathy.
I mean, you can see the family tree so clearly here. That power to build huge, complex applications, that's its inheritance from C. The simple, intuitive way you can do common tasks, that's a direct gift from Shell. And that clean, readable code that just makes Python a joy to work with, that's the legacy of ABC. It really is the best of all worlds, all rolled into one beautiful package.
And that, in the end, is the real secret to Python's success. It was never just some academic exercise or a big corporate project. It was a labor of love, born from a genuine desire to make programming more productive, more creative, and honestly, more fun. It was a language built for developers, by a developer, and I think that's why, all these years later, it still just feels like home.